Yes, good morning. We can continue the lesson, The Rattrap by Selma Lagerlöf, page number 34. You can take page number 34. There you can see that the next day both men got up in good season. So just after their sleeping, and of course when they got the next day both men got up in a good season early in the morning. The cropper was in a hurry to milk his cow. That was his profession. That was his job every day. That is his routine. So he started to do that. And the other man, that means here are Rattrap seller, or the peddler, or vagabond, or we can consider that he was a baker. So, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in the bed when the head of the house had gotten up, and then they left the cottage at the same time, and each one. Then the crofter locked the door, put the key in his pocket as owner of the cottage. The man with the rat traps said goodbye and thank you because he provided shelter, even porridge, and of course even tobacco, all those things. They shared, they played games. That's why here the man with the rat trap said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. Right? This is what happened. Then, but half an hour later, the Rattrap seller or the Rattrap peddler stood again before the door. That means that something brought him, stimulated. What is the meaning stimulation? So you can also get this is from children. Children are always curious to get something, so they are always thinking about that, and of course they are longing for that, and they have the desire. They are crying and screaming for that. So that interest again and again, they will something they will come, and of course that inducement. So here, but half an hour later, the retro peddler or seller stood again before the door. That means something brought, something induced, seduced. That's why he came, and of course within half an hour he just returned, and he did not try to get in. However, in the sense he came for another purpose. So he only went up to the window because he saw that very clearly. So he just went. So here he only went up to the window, smashed a pan. That means maybe the glass he just broke and smashed the pan, then stuck in his hands. That means he just something he tried, of course through his by using his hands. Then stuck in his hand and got hold the pouch with the 30 kroner. So 30 kroner he just took. He took the money and thrust it into his own pocket. Something I think the thief story you also came across, I think so, right? Thief story from in 10th standard, like. So here he took the money and thrust it into his own pocket as the owner of the money. Understand that it is like stealing, and of course we are conquering something. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. You understand, this is what where we stopped. Then we can resume the lesson. Then as he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. So something, whenever we have done, whenever something, when we escaped, when we have committed error without the knowledge of others, we will also please something, we will feel happy because we are always boastful. We can also pat ourselves, we have done a smart work, and ours we pleased with our smartness, like we appreciate. Likewise, he also, as he walked along with the money in his pocket, because 30 kroner in his pocket, that was something a different idea, and of course different climate is something for him, something different, because he had money, and of course without the knowledge of the crofter, without the knowledge of other people, he just that is told that. So he was very happy with the money and he was walking. So here, money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that at first he dared not continue on the public highway. You understand, while looking at that, then they will also cross examine something while looking at the peddler's image. People can something doubt, and they can also cross examine, and they can also ask probing questions, whether he will be caught. So he thought that he realized, he understood only one thing, of course, that at first he dared not, in the sense, he didn't like to, choose the public highway. Instead, he chose something in a woods. That means forest way. So here he dared not, he didn't like, he was not ready to choose the path of public highway. So here at first he dared not continue on the public highway, instead, but must turn off the road into the woods, in the sense forest area, the forest way, something he also chose. Something it is like, road not taken. You are also studied by Robert Frost, right? Something we are taking that. So into the woods, in the sense into the forest way. And during the first hours, he chose and started to work. That means, without the knowledge of others, he didn't want to meet people. Otherwise, people will ask questions and look at in a strange manner, and maybe like examining something, checking, like, and that's why he chose that. So chose them, even forest area. So in the words, during the first hours, this caused him no difficulty. Maybe 1 hour or 1.5 hours or 2 or something. The first initial stage when he started to walk in the forest. So that was not something he has this caused him no difficulty. So without you just imagine that even without water, without food, something we are continuously walking. So we will feel exhausted like. So for during the first hours, no issues. This caused him no difficulty. But later in the day, it became worse. You underline the word worse in the sense something he was unable to walk. That means for it was a big and confusing for us which he had gotten into. You understand that later in the day it became worse in the sense he needed something, he needed energy to drink, something he needed rest and of course, but he needed to you know, come out and of course catch the main road, like too many things in his mind, and he was also confused. So later in the day it became worse, for it was a big and confusing forest. So big and confusing forest you can also write like Rattrap. You understand that? That's why here what was his bait? That 30 kroner was his bait. So he was the owner of the philosophy that was the whole world has a big rat trap and all the human beings are like rats and we have our own baits. For him also, the 30 kroner considered as bait, and that's why he was also induced. He started to steal by that. He chose a different way, by that he also was caught. So later in the day, so far it was being big and confusing for us, which he had gotten into. He tried, and of course, how much ever possible, he tried to get to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and of course poured so strangely. You understand that? He tried his level best. That means he was curious to catch. He was longing for that to catch the proper direction. But to be sure, to walk in a definite direction, but the path twisted. What is the meaning? Twisted means puzzled. Right? Twisted, underline the word puzzled, are confused back and forth, here and there, back and forth. So strangely. You underline the word strangely means totally, he was caught. That means something, he was unable to balance that. He was unable to understand the situation. He was even unable to take a decision for a proper direction because totally that was confusing for us. Again and again, he was just walking the same. That's why here he walked and walked without coming to an end of the world, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. That's why it is known as confused, or we can go for twisted back and forth so strangely. So he was totally tired. So he walked and walked. That means that how much of our energy he just possessed. Of course, he tried. He walked and walked without coming to an end of the world. World in the sense that he has to cross. He has to something reach the particular direction. And finally, he realized that he came to know that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. Thus, it's like I think there is a movie in Tamil, and then I think Vadivel with the horse, and he stole, and of course with the horse he tried to escape again. That horse ran, and of course it came back because that was a restriction. That horse was trained for that only, the particular level only, particular place only, that it will go and of course return. That was a practice was given to that particular horse. Like so, again and again we are just walking around in a circling. So here circling, he also came. So here, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. So all at once he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. You understand that now he understood that that was his turn. You understand everybody. We are waiting for our own turning. When our turning calling us, then we will also go and being caught in that particular rat trap or trap. So here he all at once. So when he totally lost himself something, so exhausted, he also remembered that at all at once he recalled, remembered his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now his own turn had come. He understood that yes, this is my turn. That's why 30 kroner induced me. That is my bait, and he had let himself be fooled by a bait that had been caught. You underline the sentence. He had been let himself be fooled by a bait. Bait, underline the word and write 30 kroner, and had been caught. You understand that he had been caught in that particular forest. That forest, like we can consider the rat trap. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickest and fallen logs, closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. He was just comparing the things. You can also underline that the whole forest he had let himself be fooled by a bait 30 kroner and had been caught by the particular trap. That means here the trap is forest. The whole forest with its trunks, branches, trunks and branches, its thickest, what is I mean density of the forest. Thickest, the thickets and of course the fallen logs, underline the word. Here logs means big pieces of wood, fallen logs, closed in upon him, totally covered, wrapped. So here closed upon him like an impenetrable, underline the word impenetrable, that can't be reached, that can't be crossed. Impenetrable means that can't be reached, can't, that cannot be reached, that cannot be even solved. So like an impenetrable prison, that means crossed or reached or coming out like, so impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. From there he never escape, he cannot come, he cannot escape from that particular trap. This is what he identified. He recalled his own philosophy. That means the big, and of course the whole world as a big rat trap. Then it continued. It was late in December, it was late in December, and of course, and darkness was already around, 22, 23, 24 like. So it was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. Just imagine that he was alone in the forest. That was a confusing forest, something in a big and of course thickest, and with all the fallen, logs. So while looking at that, he was a lonely man. While looking at that, he also was threatened. So here, darkness was already descending, twilight, and of course becoming, dark. So the whole day from morning, just when they woke up, of course they just went in each the way, and then within half an hour later he became and started to do that, and of course told. Then he started to choose and of course walk in the forest. So here now, just in the whole day he had been continuously walking, and he was unable to find out the way. That's why here it was late in December, darkness was already descending. What is I mean descending, falling over the forest, in the sense of becoming dark. This increased the danger. That means fear, you underline the word. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. You underline the word. What is the meaning gloom? That means that totally he was that his sadness, and of course his fear, and of course his terror. The terror. This increased the danger, terror, and increased also his gloom, worries, sadness, and despair means that means hopelessness. Right? Despair, hopelessness, disappointment in his life, because he made a blunder, of course. You can understand that those who have the weight in his belly, they can understand very easily. So this increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally he saw no way out, that he identified. He came to a conclusion that here finally he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground. That's all. He left everything, like William O. Douglas, when the third attempt, he just left everything. Instead of attempting something, attending, and of course doing some attempt, he just left everything. He started to sleep something. So likewise here, finally he saw no way out. Then he understood, that's all. His destination comes, like that's all. His end comes very near, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death. Underline that, tired to death, in the sense submitted to death, in the sense he was totally exhausted. That means he totally lost himself. He didn't have energy to go for another attempt. That means walk and find out the way from the forest. You understand that? So finally he saw no way out, whatever, how much ever possible. He was totally lost himself. So he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. Like, as you can also compare with deep water with William O. Douglas. So thinking that this last moment had come, in the sense that's all. He was about to reach his destination. What is the meaning destination? That means that was his fatal shore. What is the meaning fatal? Fatal shore, in the sense where they are just losing and of course leaving their soul. That means they are getting their end destination. So here he tied to death, thinking that this last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard the sound, a hard regular thumping. Something was while looking at that. So without food, he was in starvation. While looking at some delicious food with smell, something that fragrance, while hearing and of course smelling, that that sensation, and of course curiosity with the energy and everything, we will also go and have that. Likewise, when we, for an example, the language problem, when we are unable to find out a Tamilian, when we are in some other places, some other country, while hearing something, our language, our mother tongue, we will be very happy, right? So likewise here, when he submitted everything, nobody was there in the forest, of course, and he also didn't want to mingle with common people, because they will also uh, create some questions, or ask some questions or doubt. That's why, so here, whatever, how much ever possible, he tried, but when he thought that that was not possible to get his survival, he just submitted everything in front of death. Then of course he lied. When he was, but just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard the sound, a hard regular thumping. You underline the word, what, maybe a workshop, and of course we consider that. So there was no doubt as to what that was. He identified that, and he raised himself. While hearing the sound, he got energy. Something, he thought that something was there. He also could get his survival. Likewise, that's why there was no doubt as to what that was. That means a thumping sound, maybe a hammer sound. What was a hammer? And what's a hammer? That regular thumping. That was a workshop, maybe an industry like. So there was no doubt as to what that was. He raised himself immediately. He just collected. You understand that someone does strength, whatever he got at the time, and of course he had at the time. Then he started to go. Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill. You can have a close to bracket, underline that, make an important symbol. This is for your objective, and of course your extract, maybe for your 2 marks also. Those are the hammer strokes. What is the meaning? Hammer strokes, sound of that hammer stroking sound. Like, you can also write hammer striking. You can underline that. Those are the hammer striking sound from an iron mill. He thought then there must be people nearby. You understand? He wanted to see. He wanted to get some help from the people. At least drinking water, something, maybe shelter, maybe food, or something he expected. So there must be people. He wanted to meet people and get something from the people. Understand? Just 30 kroner changes life, and of course he even broke his philosophy also. That there must be people nearby. He summoned all his strength. You can underline the sentence. He summoned means collected or gathered all his strength, got up and staggered in the direction on the sound. Staggered, underline the word, and right. Maybe walk unsteadily. So here, unstaggered means walk unsteadily in the direction of the sound where it was. Something that was our final chance. That was his final chance. He also thought, and he started to walk towards the sound. Then the Ramjo ironworks, which are now closed down, where now the iron mill's names Ramjo ironwork, and which are now closed down, where not so long ago, and a larger plant. You underline the word, the workshop. Underline the word, a larger plant means you write a workshop with smelter, rolling mill, and a forge. All those things. You can also imagine ironwork, iron mill. How it is like iron mill, and of course ironwork area. While looking at that the name of the mill is Ramjo Ironwork. So which are now closed down, where not so long ago, and of course a larger plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. All the things are there. You can underline the word smelter. Say here, melting of iron, one who melts iron, that process, smelter. And rolling, what is the meaning? Rolling, that process. And of course here, whatever I mentioned here, you can melting or something, heating, that melting of iron or that particular business. So smelter, rolling mill, and forge. What is the meaning? Forge, stimulate. Underline the word simulation. Yes, forts. And in the summertime, long lines of heavily loaded barges and of course cows slid down the canal, which led a large inland lake. And in the winter time, the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big cargo crates. You can also underline that. Just a minute.